Welcome to It Doesn't Take a Genius.
I'll pretend.
Welcome to It Doesn't Take a Genius. It Doesn't Take a Genius fans, both of you. I am hoping that after a number of hurdles, let's see, I got sick last week and spent a couple days with a fever in a hotel room, shivering. Mike and I weren't able to record together. I started recording this about 3 hours ago, and it's now the wee hours of the morning on December 23rd, Tuesday of 2025. But I am hoping after all of that, I'm now punting and trying to do this on my phone instead of on my fancy camera setup. But I am hoping that you are able to hear me. I am hoping that before you heard my voice, you heard the sounds of not my ukulele playing, but the song, let's try that again, the sounds of Red Harrison, who was my Pap-paw, a wonderful country and bluegrass musician. He played double bass, he played guitar, he sang, hilarious on stage. Played with Loretta Lynn, played with Kitty Wells. We have a lot of warm memories of just how good Pap-paw was. He knew all sorts of songs, and some of the folks from his era say that he could predict hits and have those hits memorized before they made it big. We've got him doing quite a few songs on a local radio jamboree back in Tennessee, where he was from. But I'm hoping you heard him, and all of that is part of the episode. There's been something bothering me that I think is a big deal for the average workplace, and it's basically the fact that we have trouble memorizing. We have trouble memorizing nowadays. And we think that we can't do it, and we've forgotten why it is so important. So I want to talk about that and give you some ideas on how we can improve it. So I started noticing this, years ago, when I started noticing at our church, we would do Christmas plays. And, there would be children in these plays, and they would be allowed to use their script even on stage during the performance. And, the basic premise was, well, we can't expect kids to memorize all that. Yes, we can. We can. We absolutely can. It comes up with workplaces, too, where employees say, well, I can't memorize all that product information and the competitive information and, details about my client, my customer, my guest. Managers saying, well, I can't really memorize all the things that I might need to know about my employees' personal life, their extracurricular interests or the names of their significant others, things like that. And yes, you can. You absolutely can. And I have some musicians to point to prove that point. My Pap-paw, Red Harrison, could run through chords as fast as you wanted. And in fact, that's how he taught me to play guitar, was he said, you need to be able to do the scales with the chords, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and do them as faster and faster and faster to where they're just muscle memory. And then you can jump to a G, you can jump to an F when you need to, because it's there. It's just muscle memory recall. I was thinking about that when I was listening to a Rick Beato interview. If you're familiar, he's on YouTube, and a tremendous musicologist, interviews a lot of big names in recording, rock and jazz, I think, too. His first guest ever back in 2016 was Steve Vai, and I recently got to listen to a double interview he did with Steve Vai and Steve Vai's guitar teacher, Joe Satriani. So back in the 70s, these two, rock electric guitar gods were teacher and student. They were both high schoolers, middle schoolers, both teenagers. And there's this tremendous story that they tell in the episode. I'll link to it in the show notes, where they talk about how Steve Vai didn't think he had good retention, didn't think he was intelligent, and said he was a very average student. And he just had this block that he couldn't memorize things. Sound familiar? And one of the first lessons he had with Joe Satriani was basically the homework was to have every note memorized on the neck of the guitar. Have every note memorized. And Steve Vai left saying, well, I can't do that, all those notes. And when he came back for the next practice, for the next lesson, Joe said, okay, play an F sharp on the B string. And he fumbled and didn't know it. And Joe said, go home, don't come back until you know all the notes. And he apparently wrote out a little note that said, if you don't know your notes, you don't know, fill in the blank, you can guess. And so, Steve Vai leaves, reeling, and he overhears Joe and his mom. And the mom says, how did the lesson go? And Joe said, my best student is losing his brain. And so Steve Vai walks home and says, whoa, best student? As in, he thinks I can memorize this stuff. And so on the way home, Steve Vai has this epiphany, and he says, I'm never not going to know my lesson entirely. And he says it gave him a sense of dignity. It was the discipline that he needed to pull out of what he called this dark cloud of belief about myself. He had this limiting belief that he couldn't memorize. Now, they go on to say in the interview that there has to be a real interest if there's going to be any retention. And they both had a high school music teacher, a real savant apparently, who was teaching them theory. He taught them composition, all sorts of things from a band perspective. And they talk about what a great man he was, and how much he had poured into them. And they, in this conversation, they say, if you're a carpenter, you want to know all the tools. If you're a chef and you only know sweet and savory, that's about as far as you get. And of course, they're talking about music theory primarily. But I want to let that be a jumping off point to talk about the fact that we have in the past been able to learn big sets of data. We absolutely could do it. We could talk about how Socrates felt like you shouldn't even write it down. It should just all be up here. And we've evolved technology to say, no, it's okay to have things in books. It's okay to have things written down. And now we're kind of having another conversation about that, thinking about Google, and now thinking about AI. And so I want to share with you a little excerpt from my upcoming book, The Lost Tools of Business, where I talk about some of these ideas from ancient times and from classical education and how they apply to the workplace. But anyway, I'm going to share this, and hopefully this helps paint the picture of how much importance there is to memory. So I'm sure I'll freestyle this a little bit, but here's the excerpt. When Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid taught karate, why did he start with washing cars? Right? Well, it turns out that wax on, wax off is one heck of a way to learn the basic motions needed for blocking punches and kicks. At least, in the movie it is. Go with me on this, right? Before he could fight, Daniel-san had to learn the grammar. Now, when I say grammar, what I mean is the elementary rules, the system. Before a child can read a book in English, she has to learn the alphabet and how to spell and sentence structure. And in really profound ways, that's what grammar is. Grammar is naming things, right? So If a letter is a shape that represents a sound, well, what do you call that shape? And if you have a set of shapes, what do you call that word? And if you have a series of a set of shapes, what do you call that sentence? It's no different from when you train for a new profession, right? You learn that field's terms and processes. And when you start a new job, you learn the names of the departments and the employee handbook details and the policies and the location of the bathroom, right? And you don't forget it. We used to learn a lot more. It might terrify you to think of how far we have really regressed in our grammar. The Greeks and the Romans, at least for them, I can say from what I've studied, they expected their sons to memorize huge swaths of things like epic poetry from Homer. The only reason their culture had such works of art in the first place was memorization. The Iliad, for instance, it was well over 15,000 lines of poetry, and it wasn't written down until hundreds of years after it was composed. And oh, by the way, Homer, the poet, was blind. It was all memorized. That's the legend. Well, you don't have to go that far back to compare our memories with those of the past. You can look to works of American literature, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Little Town on the Prairie from the Little House series. Both feature scenes where elementary school students are reciting from memory long poems, whole sets of facts like the timeline of American history. And they aren't really exceptional moments in the books. They're just sort of part of the story of what's expected of students. And to be totally fair, Tom Sawyer fails at reciting "Give me liberty" or "Give me death," and it's hysterical, of course. But where are we now? Right? We're not expecting people to memorize that at elementary school level or at adult level, right? The teachers have shared, I've read countless articles where the teachers are sharing how students are taking writing prompts that they're given and putting them directly into internet search bars and allowing the results to give the answers they need and eliminate any need of just a personal recall of the subject out of their own brain, let alone the thinking beyond the recalling. Some have shared how teens are unable to even read long texts now. They forget about internalizing them. Just reading them is just asking too much. And of course, it's gotten worse. I wrote The Lost Tools of Business before ChatGPT, and the fear that we are surrendering our need for recall of any subject has become much more real. According to researchers, and I'll give you a quote here, they call this digital amnesia, the Google effect. This is the quote: "The experience of losing our internet connection becomes more and more like losing a friend. We must remain plugged in to know what Google knows." And we should probably add to that at this point, to know what AI thinks it knows, right? It's not even trusted data necessarily, and yet we're offloading our memory abilities to say, well, I can just check AI. Almost every manager I have served can relate to this issue, right? Employee training that has just become Groundhog Day. Every day, a fight to get people away from their smartphones and get their attention. Every day, an attempt to repeat a lesson that was forgotten from the day before. To paraphrase a Renaissance statesman, intelligence may be more important than memory, but intelligence without memory is worthless. Now, Mike and I may have a future debate about whether that's true in the AI world, but I do think you've got to have some stuff internalized, and not just because someday you may be without the internet, right? It's just good for you. And as Steve Vai pointed out, it actually is a dignity thing. It's something about your self-worth to be able to say, no, I can do this, and recall and use those tools, that grammar, in the moment when the time comes, with that client, with that employee, etc. All right, so that's my argument on why it's important. Now, let me suggest 4 things. 2 of them are kind of big, and 2 of them are going to be sort of subset, smaller things. But let me suggest some ideas on how you can go about using your memory and improving your memory. And the first 2 are to organize and to visualize. So what I mean by that is you need to organize the information that you're wanting to memorize, and you need to do that by putting them into categories. Organize them into categories. So for instance, if you are trying to memorize product information about a new model of car that you will be selling or servicing or working on parts for, one of the things that you will do is think about it in terms of powertrain, the things you know about the powertrain, in terms of the entertainment system, in terms of the environmental controls, and so on. You're going to organize all the subsets, all the bullets that you know under each of these subsets. That will help you memorize things because you're putting them into categories and dealing with just one category at a time. So that's organizing the information into the categories. But now to recall that information, it often helps me to visualize the information in an actual location in my mind. All right. So the ancients called this palaces of memory. And the idea was that you had it laid out in this palace in your head, this imaginary location in your head, and you knew where the various facts were. You imagined that they were in this room on the left and this room on the right, depending on the category, for instance. And so what that allowed you to do was to quickly use the visual aspects of your brain to let you pull and recall quickly the things that you needed to bring forward. I knew a waiter in college. He worked at the Red Lobster, and he was an excellent waiter, got a lot of tips, and he never wrote down any of the orders. Would have given me the heebie-jeebies, but he did it. And he told me that the way he did it was to imagine the meal that the person ordered being tossed on that person. So, somebody orders the lobster, he imagines a lobster sitting on the head of Mrs. So-and-so at the table. And so he would have this visual map in his head of what the meals were based on where they were sitting around the table and the food laying on top of them. Does that sound a little crazy? Yeah, I get that. But the idea of being able to visually recall things, you can just imagine how much quicker you can be with visuals instead of just words. So organize the information into categories, visualize the information in an actual location, and it will probably help to physically write it down. So this is sort of one of those subsets that I mentioned. So this is really point 3. Organize it, visualize it, and then write it down. And writing it down could be literally making an outline of the facts you know. So in other words, if you're memorizing product features, you've got each of those categories that I mentioned listed on a page: environmental controls, powertrain, and so on. And underneath you have the bullets. And what's going to start happening is you'll be thinking in your head, top left, there were 3 bullets there. Those were the 3 things I know about the powertrain. And so it's sort of like an on-paper version of this palaces of memory concept. And you'll find that you can even do it with a physical book. With a physical book, you'll be able to recall this. I read about the famous pastor who passed away, I believe it was this year. John MacArthur had a huge TV and radio ministry, and I read that he would really internalize a whole book of the Bible, and he would do it by reading it over and over and over again in the same printing of the Bible. And the reason he would do that is because he could say, 2 Peter chapter 1, yeah, that's bottom of the left-hand page, column 2, right? And he could recall what was there because he had it physically mapped in his head. So physically writing things down and using those written materials can really help you visualize. Another thing is flashcards. Flashcards work for a couple reasons. One is, again, you're writing them down, and that's valuable. And the other is repetition. You're using the flashcards over and over again, and you just develop muscle memory. True story. I had a young man that is one of the students that I've been tutoring for the last few years in a classical program, and his mom had him do the suggested curriculum over Christmas break, which was that year, to write down the appendices of a logic textbook 10 times each. I believe it was 10. It may have been 20. And he wrote down 3 different tables that were these appendices. They were one-page tables of what just seemed like gobbledygook, looked like formulas with letters and codes and so on. And he memorized them accidentally. He didn't have a clue what they meant, but he was able to use them, because the whole next semester we learned about how to use those various codes that he had memorized and put them to place in solving syllogisms, logical syllogisms. He didn't have a clue what any of that meant when he was going through the process of internalizing it, but by golly, after copying it down 10 or 20 times each, he had it in his brain. And I'll remember that day that it suddenly popped into his head. He was so mad at all the other students that they hadn't been forced, quote unquote, to learn, and he was forced to learn, except, what am I learning? What am I learning? And then one day the penny dropped and he went, oh my gosh, I know how to do this. I know all these patterns. This isn't a problem. I know what this means. So there's a concrete example from recent times that you can memorize, and it really can help you. I hope you think about things in your life where it would just be better to have quick recall. Organize that information into categories, visualize it in some way so you can recall it quickly, and write it down, use flashcards. It's going to seem silly the first few times you do that as a grown adult using flashcards, but I'm telling you, it is a powerful, powerful tool. So I hope this little episode helps, and I hope when we publish this thing that you enjoy the rest of the Lost Tools of Business. Like, subscribe, comment, let us know what you think, and we'd love to hear what you're doing with memory and what you'd like to do with memory going forward in 2026, which will be here 2 episodes from now. We'll talk to you then. Let's hopefully close out by listening to some more Red Harrison.
Have you ever been to Richmond in November, when the cold Virginia rain is pouring down? Friends, I'm here to tell you it's no pleasure when you're all alone, a stranger to the town. Don't take me wrong, I do like East Virginia, and Richmond's full of hospitality, except for one Virginia girl I know of, who's made a perfect love record